Right, hi guys, Luton here. First of all, sorry for my voice. I've been sick all this week and it's not 100%. Everybody is talking about Battlefield 5 at the moment. I'm not, though, talking about the next title because that's just the trend. I'm actually talking about it because I was testing out my Tech Syndicate standard issue mouse this week, and in doing so, I jumped into Battlefield 4 with Lone Wolf, who you remember I played with back in Battlefield Hardline, and we were talking about Battlefield in its current state. Now, I've seen a lot of producers creating like a wish list for the next Battlefield title, or a top 5 or a top 10. For me, it's less of a wish list and more a, if you don't add these things, I probably am going to be at that point check myself out of the Battlefield franchise list. It's gotten to that point for me now. I've seen everyone lately stating that suddenly Battlefield 4 has gone from being a game with a lot of issues to an amazing, fun game. Really? Because for me what it feels like is a game which has had some small technical issues in the past but has still remained incredibly frustrating to play. Why? Because of the total lack of team coordination and just a random feel to most gameplay, even when you're in a squad. I played through several rounds of Conquest and Domination and not even a single one gave me anywhere close to the intense or interesting level of gameplay that I wanted. I got this when I hosted my own server and I got people to come onto the server and fight hard. We had some of the best games we've ever had, and many people who played there said that these were the best games they've ever had. But when you go to a public game, it still feels exactly as it did when I stopped playing, which was unbelievably about 3 months ago now. Now, this is not to say Battlefield is a bad game, it's an incredibly good game, but as I've come to realise, it's a combination of the mechanical design of the game combined with the community that has slowly ruined it. No amount of balancing, patches or new maps and guns is going to change that. So what is the core issue? I don't want to get into a huge analysis here because it's something I've already spoken a lot about on the channel, but it comes down to team play. Now, team play doesn't necessarily mean stuffy, dry squad work where you only call out enemies to one another in a milsim style. It just means that you're really focusing on securing and attacking those enemy objectives as a team. And people claim that this is impossible to do unless you're all in voice communication or that someone is overseeing things like a commander and telling people what to do. This is quite honestly nonsense. All you need to be coordinated is the smallest amount of willpower and some common sense. If you look at your map of, let's say, 4 flags you control, A, B, and let's say the enemy control C and D, okay, so 2 and 2. You see, let's say 60% of your team are moving to attack the D flag. You might be thinking to yourself two things. Either the enemy will likely counterattack where I am now, or maybe they're going to go to defend D because my team are attacking it. So then you could decide, well, me and my squad are either going to move towards C, look at its strength and take it if we can, or we're going to stay here and defend. Now just apply that to any situation. You're making decisions based off of the information you can see. You don't need someone to tell you what to do. You don't need to just sit there and do nothing. It all comes down to simply making very basic assessments of where people are, what's going on, and what you should do next. It's not rocket science, it's A, B, C stuff. Pushing people to play in this style does not mean you're restricting people, it does not mean you're forcing them, but what it means is that you're directing people toward the primary focus of the game, which is and always should be playing the objective. And anybody who thinks that it isn't is just, they're flat out wrong, okay? The objective in any game mode is the foundation of that game. It's why it's called that, the game mode. You're in there to play that mode. It's what you're meant to be doing. Anything in that situation that comes out of it, it's just an extra bonus. Battlefield has stopped being about hard battles between teams, and it tragically now is just an ego fest about who can get the most kills. So instead of being in a game where people are fighting for objectives and getting some intense battle moments out of that, what you have is just a playground slap fight where two teams are pushing each other back and forth but are too scared to actually get involved. You see this all the time. This has a knock-on effect in many ways. For example, people that I've observed in public games are usually unwilling to change their loadout to deal with things like a tank or a helicopter, which subsequently means your team get progressively more destroyed and pinned down. Back in Battlefield 2 or Bad Company or even Battlefield 3 to an extent, usually when a tank or something like this was around, anything that's a problem player, problem vehicle, you would suddenly see a lot of engineers appear to neutralise that quite quickly, even in public games. That is so rare now, because people are like, hey, I've got my best gun loadout, I'm going to stick with that. Combine this with the fact that the actual weapons themselves have so little variation in them that you could almost choose anything and do equally well with it. You'll remember that Lone Wolf, player that I played back with in Battlefield Hardline, he originally disagreed with me He was a very good player as well, but he originally disagreed with me about the fact that, all the guns played pretty much the same. It didn't really make a lot of difference. So he decided to go and heavily test out a load of weapons in many situations on different modes. After he'd done this, he actually turned around his opinion and agreed that it actually had very little effect on your gameplay. You could do generally as well overall, because there was so much random situations, which was a consequence of how the team was playing. There certainly is no such thing as a best gun or a god gun. No such thing like that exists. So let's move on and wrap this up, because we've heard me talk about all these kind of things a lot before. What do I want to see in the next game? Because I'm not just hoping for it, but because it will literally determine if I even choose to continue playing the Battlefield franchise or not. That's not to say that these are all elements which must be in the game if I want to continue playing it, but if we don't see something like this, something comparable, a big change, then I just won't really see the purpose in continuing, because the gameplay will remain the same. First of all, the most important and obvious thing is that we need to see a focus on team play. I know that'll be a shock to many of you that that's top on my list. I want to see not just a tweaking of score, although that does need to happen. Score, let's talk about that. It could be affected by many things. For example, I had an idea for a fluid scoring system. This was one suggestion where if your team already controlled, say, 75% of the flags on a map, capping that last flag will actually gain your team, or the people capping it, very little points. There's very little incentive there to actually go do that. But for the enemy team, securing back any flag at that point will be a big bonus, because it has a hell of a lot more weight for them in terms of achieving the objective. This will enable you to really judge who is being most benefit to a team by giving those players more score, more points when it matters most. I should actually probably do a separate video on this, as it's one of the things I want the most, and I think it would work really, really well. Kills, while important, should always come secondary to securing an objective. We all know the old rationalization that if someone is killing a lot, that's going to benefit your team. Of course, this is true, but it shouldn't mean that that person is top of the board. While they are assisting the team for sure, they're not winning the game. Unless people run out there and actually cap those objectives, put themselves at risk, their efforts are really helping no one than themselves. So kill scores should be more of a bonus to boost you up than a primary score. I have to say, I really hold little hope of this actually changing. When you look at something like Star Wars Battlefront and the fact they decided to highlight kills over everything else, even on objective heavy modes like Walker Assault, I still can't even begin to understand how that was decided. It is just so absurd. We need to see a genuine change in the way people are rewarded in the game. Simply highlighting what it is people are meant to do isn't going to change things. This means that if you want to see a change, you've got to lead it with the carrot and not with the stick. This, no doubt, would be unpopular, as people who like to sit farming kills or just generally dicking around wouldn't be able to quickly gain new gear. But hey, tough. What I want to see is a whole new system to unlock gear. Instead of just gaining XP to level up, what you would have is 3 systems. The first would be the standard kills unlock attachments, as we saw in Battlefield 4. That works absolutely fine, and it's pretty good. The second would be XP, as we have now. Okay, it would behave similar to Battlefield 4, except that it would take longer to gain that XP from the kind of general actions. I want to see XP gained slower, and definitely not a lot of XP for kills in a game. So a moderate amount of normal XP for just killing, assisting, medicing, etc., things like this, to unlock guns and gadgets. Maybe if you win a round, you get a little bit more than the losing team, etc., etc. Now the third one is the new idea. In Hardline, we saw a credit system. Now, this can be good and bad. It's bad if it's implemented how it was in Hardline, because they made it so that all you had to do was grind money, credits. This meant people would just simply drive around and round in cars until they had the cash, or just, leech that money from other things. It was a terrible and poorly thought out system that was just abused from day one. But what I want to do is take that and turn it into a positive. So instead of gaining money, you would gain what I would call objective credits. So these, let's say O credits, would be gained by players who assist or primarily capture objectives. They could also perhaps be given a small amount for the top 3 players on the team if the scoring was adequately balanced towards the objective. So these O credits would then enable people to separately unlock weapons and gear more quickly. So let's say in your list of things to unlock, each thing would have like an XP requirement, but then also an O credit requirement. These O credits, as I say, would enable people to unlock them more quickly. This would provide a huge incentive to the players to actually focus on the objective, and it would also be a massive reward. So in doing so, you'd benefit every other aspect of gameplay, making it more exciting, better engagements, and a better learning curve for players because of the type of environment and the type of battle situations they find themselves in. This system would then be able to continue past the level and gear cap. Once players reach the top, they'll be able to continue gaining O points from gameplay in order to unlock special gear, aesthetics, so on, these kind of things, meaning it would give a continuing benefit and a continued focus to team play, even when everybody's unlocked everything. The UI system, we could also update somewhat with a visual and audio prompt from a commander, like, hey, the enemy are capping D. This would be, you'd have to make it customizable so people could disable that if they wished, but it could be hugely useful in public modes to just, remind people what's happening and where they should look to move. It's very easy to get tunnel vision or sidetracked from what's going on elsewhere in the map, and if you're not in a squad or communicating with people in that way, or you're maybe just a bit out of it and you're not looking at what's going on, having something like that come up would maybe remind you, hey, this is actually happening, I need to move back there. So that would be beneficial. I say you have to disable it so it can become too spammy and annoying though. We also need to see what people have been saying for the longest time, that the end of round data breakdown focuses on your overall performance and not just kills. You could even implement a system like in Overwatch, where it has different categories of player benefit to your team, so something like anti-armor, defender, killer, pilot, and it selects who best performed from the teams, and then players can vote up those, who was the best overall player of the match. Maybe they get some small bonus from that. Now, a lot has been spoken about maps for a long time. Everybody seems to agree that they need specific maps for specific modes. It probably won't surprise you that I disagree with this. Sorry, not sorry. So why must I always disagree? Well, for one thing, I really think people are just overstating the problem. Most of the maps on Battlefield 4 were designed pretty well, and if you look back at Battlefield 3 and Bad Company, the same thing happened there. Arica Harbour was clearly designed as a rush map, but it played out on Conquest just fine too. Similarly, Atacama Desert was a nightmare on Rush with those gigantic open areas to cover, but it played also awesome on Conquest, and so on and so on. There are just so many examples. Dev teams don't have infinite amounts of time or resources to just make a map per mode. All that needs to happen is they just have to carefully design maps to include areas that fulfill both aspects, and generally that does tend to happen. The biggest change that needs to happen is not the map design, but game mode player count limits. EA DICE have been refusing to do this for the longest time, but if they don't get that it needs to happen this time around, I really am going to be banging my head against a wall. Conquest is a huge, expansive mode that is played across a big map and many vehicles. This suits 64 players. Rush is a tight, confined tactical assault that needs players to break a line and push forward. It suits 24 players best and 32 sometimes, depending on the map. So long as we design well thought out maps with the primary modes in mind, limit player counts to the mode, it's just going to be fine. Talking about modes, I want to see some things back as primary game modes. Conquest, it has to be in there. Conquest Assault, because it's a bastard and it really suits tough gameplay if you want a big challenge. Rush, because I hope it will work this time. Domination, because infantry gameplay is fun. And Chainlink, because it's a fucking brilliant mode, and if they drop that out, I'm going to be massively disappointed. I want to see as well a proper tutorial that is short but is a requirement before you play any mode for the first time. Show people what to do and why they are doing it. Also, between rounds, instead of just a pretty picture on the map, can we please have a tactical overlay showing people about flanking, focusing on vehicles to weaken the enemy, etc, etc. This has ongoing benefits, as new people always joining the game, they need to see this stuff. The radial menu is generally designed to make requests like, hey, I need ammo, I need health, thank you, etc, etc. We should really look to upgrade this so that squad leaders can get some tactical options like hold here, attack, defend, pull back, move here, and enable them to point anywhere, so it creates a UI mark for other people to see. Then if other players need, they can react. Maybe it's just for the squad, maybe it's for the team. There's a lot more that can be done with the radial menu. Battle Nonsense has some great ideas. I'll throw his channel down below so you can go check that out. You could even look at making the radial menu customizable so that you can set it up with a purely tactical or team support setup, etc, etc. Or maybe different classes have different radial menu basic setups. So there's a lot that can be done with this, and it should really not be overlooked. Let's talk about something I love to hate. Weapon missions with DLC should be dropped completely. I don't want to have to be standing in some stupid tower or getting 20 kills while I drop mid-air to unlock a gun. I just want to use objective points to unlock these guns so it continues to push people toward the objective. Tailoring unlock systems for new weapons creates incredibly bad gameplay and ruins the experience in a lot of DLC maps when they first come out. Please don't do this anymore. Also tied into that, I'm going to say Easter eggs. For God's sake, sure, make little sandcastles on the beach with a flag in it, but can we please stop with the crazy missions for bow and arrows, okay? The dog tag thing was, again, really destructive for gameplay, and the reward just meant people running around handicapping their team like a weight around their neck. Can we try and keep things a little bit more traditional this time? I really hold out little hope of this, but I thought I should add it in anyway, as everybody knows my point of view on this. Okay, so we're going to come to the last thing, and it's a big one. Weapons. In Battlefield, yes, the weapons have difference, but it really isn't enough of a difference to care that much. What we need to see is fewer guns and more specific focus for setups. This means it shouldn't be simply that the next gun has got like 10% better range or fire rate or whatever. We need to see a heavier difference in their handling and their stats to a specific purpose. Make less guns, less attachments, but more significance for the setups. I've referenced it many times, but COD 4 did this brilliantly. It had a limited selection of weapons, but you really knew where you were with the guns in COD 4. It felt like you were selecting your precision tools of choice, whereas in Battlefield 4, and definitely in Hardline, you can just blindly reach and grab anything to hand, and it makes little or no difference overall. This also needs to happen if they were going to implement something like my objective point system I was talking about before. If the guns are just upgraded each level, then this means people will just save and then unlock the best one, as they did in Hardline. Guns need to fulfill a role in the game and have a specific purpose. This is easier to balance when you have less weapons to deal with, as you can tailor them more to actions that are happening. They don't need to have realistic handling, they don't need to have realistic damage models either. This doesn't mean we want to see like an RPG style game when it comes to damage, but it does mean we shouldn't panic if a gun has got more severe recoil than in real life. The G3 was, for example, a great gun. It was one of my favourite guns actually in Battlefield 3. It kicked like a bitch, but it was powerful and it was just a great gun to master. It was also a really slow fire rate. What we need in Battlefield 5 is a selection of well-varied weapons with some that are easy to use but don't always give you a huge benefit, and more powerful weapons that are more difficult to master. This will then reward players for learning about the weapons and setup choices instead of it just being a game of collect all the guns. So those are the things that will make or break Battlefield 5 for me. It's primarily the team-focused stuff. If all DICE EA do is make some minor changes to scoring, that won't be enough to improve the game. They need to fundamentally redirect the way people play. Beautiful maps, new guns and vehicles won't do enough to provide new or interesting gameplay. If they don't look and see now that this is really the last chance to convince many people that Battlefield can provide hard-fought, exciting gameplay, I think for many people, including me, this is going to be a title that's hit or miss. We don't even know what the game is going to be yet, despite some rumours flying around, and this will, I'm sure, largely determine how some elements are going to play out. Ultimately though, you can make the best environments, the best balance of weapons and great map design, but if you don't encourage the now huge player base of Battlefield to actually focus on the core foundations of the game, i.e. team play, it's going to play exactly as it does right now, which is round after round of frustration, extremely limited team play, and for me, just boredom. I sincerely hope we see a big change of perspective in Battlefield 5, only time is going to tell. Leave your comments down below, guys. Thanks for watching as always.